So I saw a headline this week that made me really mad. I'll show it to you. The headline is "What Socrates Can Teach Us About Living an Optimized Life." And I'll be honest, before I even read the article, I got real pissed and I started thinking about how I was going to make a video about how dumb it is that all these weird tech bro chuds have just bastardized Greek philosophy and the philosophical tradition for the sake of justifying their lifestyles that are based on exploitation and accumulation and just being the worst people, but then using philosophy to try to justify it. And then I read the article and it's not so bad. It's not as bad as I thought it would be. And I guess the guy that wrote it, Daniel J. Robertson, wrote a book that seems like it's not so bad. But I still think there's some stuff we could talk about here. And the broader question of the relevance of philosophy to self-help, I think, is really, really important. So let's talk about a few things in this article. We'll get to some other stuff too. There'll be some unexpected surprises. It's going to be a real adventure today. But thanks for being here. I'm Michael Burns. My channel is new. Thanks to those of you who have hung out and watched things thus far, especially for those of you that watched last week's video. A bunch of you did, and I really liked the comments. So let's get into this article again. It's called "What Socrates Can Teach Us About Living an Optimized Life." Now, here's an early quote. It says, "The spirit of the academy lingers," referring to Plato's academy. Serves as a reminder of a time when philosophy was a shared journey, not just an academic exercise. I love this. Some of you probably know I used to be a philosophy professor, so I think about this a lot. By offering a contemporary exploration of Socratic wisdom and its practical relevance to our everyday lives, I seek to rekindle some sense of what it might once have been like to walk there, conversing with Socrates and his fellow philosophers. I think this is cool. Now, for those of you who don't know who Socrates is, I bet a lot of you do. Socrates, kind of like the OG of the Western philosophical tradition, someone that never wrote himself. Famously, he was Plato's teacher. Plato was Aristotle's teacher. Aristotle went on to teach DJ Premier how to produce rap tracks, stuff like that. But Socrates is known for the Socratic method, which, again, something you probably know, you might know about, which is sort of asking questions for the sake of getting someone else to expose flaws in their own logic. It's sort of like a strategic negativity or curiosity. Okay, so that's the basis of who we're talking about here. Now, in talking about self-help culture, the author goes on to say, for instance, should our self-improvement be measured in terms of achieving external goals such as wealth and reputation, or inner ones such as wisdom and self-mastery? What really constitutes human flourishing or a good life? And this is important because a lot of the people that want to use philosophy to do self-help do this thing where what they basically do is like, how can you use philosophy to be good at job? How can you use philosophy to be number one man at money? How you can use the principles of existentialism to better exploit overseas workers to increase your profit margin so you could spend more money on your second family that got constituted via an affair when you were at a business conference. Stuff like that. And there's people on the internet and on YouTube that have made an ass ton of money off this. I think like the School of Life is one of those places that does the philosophy of self-help thing. And I really don't like it because I think philosophy is aiming to do something else and something way more important. And this piece ultimately kind of gets at it. And the guy does it through talking about the contrast between Socrates and the sophist. So if you guys heard of like sophistry, however one says it before, here's how he describes these guys. He says the sophist charged hefty fees for teaching young men how to become more persuasive speakers with promise is that they would thereby achieve success in public life. Modern influencers often profess to teach us how to succeed in our careers and relationships. Okay, daddy like, because here the author of this article is creating a contrast between you have, Socrates, seeker of wisdom. You have the sophist, the sophist. They just want to teach you how to speak more good to make more money and things like that. And I think the relationship to contemporary influencers is important. Because we all know there's a lot of people on the internet who will gladly take your money to try to make you like more successful or more suave or help you do sex or make money, mostly just do sex or make money. But there's also a type of person on the internet that uses rhetoric to convince you that they're smart and they have the best arguments and all this sort of stuff. But with the sophists, the end goal of that is them looking like the smartest boys and then them making money, right? Socrates, not a guy that made money. He was poor and gross, and people didn't like him because for him, philosophical wisdom wasn't aimed at making money. Now, this is the author still talking about sort of influencer sophistry. He says, acquiring our beliefs passively in this way risks making us dangerously dependent on the opinions of other people by reducing our ability to think for ourselves. We get opinions, the appearance of knowledge, rather than genuine knowledge. I think this is really important because it's getting at the idea that a lot of influencery, self-helpy, I'm a really smart streamer type guys, they give us opinions using convincing rhetoric or using hyperbole or using flashiness, but in doing so, it reduces our ability to think for ourselves. And at the end of the day, a Socratic position and the point of philosophy in general should be to help us think for ourselves. Think for yourself. Just do it. And just a reminder, what I'm going to do for all these videos now is there's going to be the regular version on YouTube and an extended cut over on Patreon. The extended cut today, I'm going to add some stuff about Kierkegaard, one of my favorite philosophers, and some other tidbits that I think are relevant here. The main video, I promise, will still be good, but you can check out the Patreon. There's a link in the description for all of the extended cuts. Thank you for everyone that joined this week. It's pretty nuts that you did. Now, getting back to the sophist, professional advisors of the sophists became increasingly famous and staggeringly wealthy by teaching politicians the art of persuasion. These men gave celebrated speeches which exploited common insecurities and prejudices. Wow, what does this sound like? What does this sound like, friends? People teaching politicians how to speak and giving speeches themselves that use prejudice and insecurity, taking advantage of people, getting them to believe some toxic things, a curious hybrid of political and self-improvement rhetoric involved, which encouraged privileged young men to view contempt for their perceived inferiors as something strong and manly. A type of politics that involves self-improvement rhetoric, which tells the young men to hate their inferiors and that it's strong and manly to do so. Yeah, this sounds like life. It sounds like the life that we live in. And I actually think the author here points at some interesting stuff, but doesn't go all the way, and that's fine. This was an article in Esquire. He wrote a book he wants to sell copies of. I think he doesn't want to be too mean, but I think that is an important line of demarcation between what philosophy does and what sophistry does, what the weird mix of like self-help online bro talk with politics stuff does. And we're going to get to the sort of Socratic politics thing in a few, so just hold on to your butts, Samuel L. Jackson says in Jurassic Park. The author says, I will leave it to you to observe more specific parallels between ancient Athens and our modern political landscape. It's not hard. It's not hard to see those parallels right here. And later in the piece, he says, Socrates is trying to snap us out of a trance by asking questions, but the benefits of awakening can be difficult to describe to those who are still entranced. He's referencing Plato's cave here. I'm going to talk about the cave in a second. In case you just thought this sounds like the cave, we're going to get to the cave. A couple lines later, he says, if you can genuinely experience the impact of Socrates' questions, you may learn to think more critically and reflectively. These skills can help you when faced with the pronouncements of modern-day sophists on the internet or authority figures in other walks of life. It does take practice, though. So the gist here, right? Being properly Socratic, and we'll talk about what that means in a quick second, can help snap us out of the stupor that we're often in by just watching people on the internet all the time. It can help snap us out of our common sense beliefs that we just sort of pick up from people around us, from the media, from the news, from digital sources, from bad books and weird podcasts. And when we talk about thinking more critically and reflectively here, it is learning skills that can help you see why the loudest voices in the room often being the internet, are not often the smartest, right? Because what is Socratic wisdom? What is wisdom in general in a philosophical sense? And I'm going to talk a lot more about this on this here channel. So these are just some breadcrumbs, folks. But Socratic wisdom and philosophical wisdom more generally involves bracketing our assumptions. It involves imagining that we might be wrong. It involves an openness to the fact that our fundamental assumptions about life and reality could, in fact, not be true, which is scary, right? And Socrates, of course, for those of you who know this or don't know this, he got. The state killed him. The state literally killed him. Yeah, that's right. One of the first most famous philosophers got murdered by the state. So states have been doing violence for a long time. It's not a new thing. And this is what he got charged with when they killed him. It says Socrates breaks the law because he does not recognize the gods recognized by the city, and because he introduces other new divinities, and he breaks the law because he corrupts the youth. And here's what all that's saying, right? When he doesn't recognize the gods of the city, it's basically saying Socrates doesn't recognize the dominant, social political values of the state. When he introduces new divinities, he's basically saying other things might be true. And in corrupting the youth, he's encouraging young people to think outside the dominant paradigm, perpetuated to them by their parents or whoever it may be. Okay? And again, just going to tease you with some stuff here. There's a lot we can talk about later. And please do let me know what sort of stuff you want to hear me talk about. Philosophy, religion, politics, obscure rap music, the improvisations of the Grateful Dead. Any of these things we can talk about and more. And I'd love to talk about all of these with you. Now, I think that there's a couple things we can take away from this. Now, one is that the author does a solid job in the piece I'm referring here of talking about the way in which Socratic wisdom can help us fight against chud logic and fight against the sort of lure of, sophist and the allure of charming, weird online men and stuff like that. But I think there's a sort of political side, and this is sort of my reading of Socrates. And I think this is important. Because we know Socrates gets killed by the state. And he gets killed by the state not just because he was so good at self-help. He gets killed by the state because I think that what we see in the works of Socrates and in Plato's Socrates and books like The Republic is that this sort of philosophical wisdom that helps us develop ourself isn't isolated, right? Because we exist in society with other people, and society has, laws and order and ideology and all this sort of stuff. So there's a direct social impact for these sorts of things. Now look at a line from The Republic. It's from Book 7 of Plato's Republic. And for those of you who don't know this part of the book, it's about Plato's cave. The real gist here is there's some people that live in the cave. They just look at shadows on the wall. They don't know about the real world. The guy goes outside the cave, sees the real world. Oh my God, I can't see anything. I can't see anything. It's so bright. Whoa. I'm now seeing things as they really are. I'm understanding the depth of truth and reality. This is amazing. I'm going back down to the cave to see my friends and be like, dogs, you will not believe this. There's a bunch more going on. It's like Matrixy stuff. It's Matrixy stuff. But look what happens, okay? So he goes back down into the cave. And it says, if there were a contest, and the guy that goes back down into the cave had to compete in measuring the shadows with the prisoners who had never moved out of the den, the cave, while his sight was still weak, and before his eyes had become steady, would he not be ridiculous, right? This notion being, if you just lived in a cave, and all you saw was BS, ideology, shadows, what you were supposed to see, you go outside. When you come back down to that world, it's almost like you're going to be bad at experiencing the world as a pile of BS. And look what the other prisoners do. Men would say of him that up he went and down he came without his eyes, and that it was better not even to think of ascending. And if anyone tried to lose another and lead him up to the light, let them only catch the offender, and they would put him to death. Here's what that's saying, guys. When the Socratic figure goes and experiences wisdom, when the Socratic figure is willing to challenge dominant ideological narratives and see things maybe as they really are, and then tries to share that with others, the response of the others is to ridicule and kill. So there are direct implications for this. And I do think that we can maybe get cocky here. And here's what I mean by that, fellow cocksmen. We might get cocky and just think, oh yeah, all the worst right-wing people are the guys that want to kill those of us who speak truth or something like that. And that's a temptation. It's a temptation that I understand because we got some bad hombres over on the far right these days. But I think that it's probably more like the establishment liberals that we got to think of here. People that think they are ethical, they do understand how things work and how neoliberalism and capitalism and a little bit of like a human rights ethic all come together to make a great world. Because who shuts down radical thinking more than centrist and liberals? Almost no one, to be honest. There's times these days where it feels like weird right-wingers are more open to critical ideologies. That's not to say they're good, but I think this kind of Socratic thinking reminds us to always be willing to challenge our own assumptions, to challenge the dominant assumptions of society. And something I always think of is it can be an easy temptation to learn some philosophy and be critical in our thinking and use that in only an external way to constantly be criticizing the world around us and, structures of power and things like that. But I think maybe we got to remember that we always have to start with ourselves. Maybe that sounds corny. But we do have to start with a level of self-interrogation before we interrogate externally. And I think when we look at figures, writers, intellectuals, people on the internet, ask yourself if you're listening to people who are willing to self-interrogate, because if they're not, they're probably bad. Okay. So that's the main gist today. I do want to remind you, I did set up a Patreon. Here's the levels these days. You can be a dog, a big dog, or a biggest dog. It's insane that some of you signed up for this, but I really appreciate it. Because you did, I'm now going to try to make stuff better. A few people reached out this week about helping me edit. So I'm going to try to get like a better camera, get some editing. But I want to build out that community so I can keep doing this. I'm having fun thus far. Let me know, and there's a Patreon again, link in the description. Let me know if there's stuff that you want to hear me talk about, because I would gladly do it. Please subscribe, leave comments, all that shit. It's weird to say, but it's true. And for, those of you who are watching on YouTube, this is it. You have a great day. For those on Patreon, the extended cut is going to start in just a second. I'll see you guys soon.